So the next metric we're going to talk about is the torso metric. So a lot of times you might think of torso, pelvis. They really move in 3 planes of motion in the swing. So if we use sort of the technical terms, we think sagittal, but really that's just sort of forward and back. So if we're thinking of torso, it would be this move, right? We can think of frontal, which is side to side. So we're thinking of this move with the torso, and then transverse, which is just rotation. So we're thinking of this move. So one of the awesome metrics that it measures is forward bend and side bend of the torso. One thing that maybe you've heard is that we'll have a little bit of a hinge, right? We have an implement, we have a bat that we have to get to the ball. And so in the swing, it is important that there's a little bit of a hinge position. So you'll see this sort of forward move of the chest to come down, or the torso. And then one thing that we might have talked about, or you might have heard, is that in order to get the bat where it needs to be, we want to hold that angle. And so the way we do that in the swing is that we maintain it through side bend to be able to get to the ball. Now, of course, because as we've said a few times, the pitcher's in charge here, that height that we do, or the angle we do, will adjust based on the height of the pitch. So we might have a little more side bend on a low pitch versus a high pitch, especially in softball where rise ball is a pitch that gets a lot of us. We might have to make sure that we're adjusting to that pitch. One thing that we see, and then we're going to go through in the metrics in the biomechanics, is that sometimes our hitters get early side bend, meaning they haven't started the rotation yet. So they'll start going into their stride, right? And instead of thinking about maintaining that posture, we'll start to see them get into that side bend when they haven't started the rotation yet. So if we think of, sometimes people might say, you know, their shoulders go up, they drop the bat. We see the things that happen later as a result of this. But really what's happening is that they're starting to break posture too early. And so we're getting into this side bend. So sometimes you'll see like a big C on these hitters. So that's definitely something that we will want to attack. If we think about rotation as we're going to the pitcher, we want to be as stacked as possible, right? So for hitting, that means yes, we're in a hinge, but otherwise thinking of like head, you know, out, so that the bottom part of my body, and I'm rotating right around that pull. So any break of that, whether it's coming from a break of that, I'm hanging back a little bit, I'm going too forward, my hips are coming back under, whatever it is, any break of that stack position is going to make my rotation not as efficient. And so if we think about what this looks like and then trying to rotate on this path, it's going to be harder, it's going to slow down my rotation. I'm almost certainly going to come out of order a little bit. It usually impacts bat pass, so we'll see the bat kind of take a long time to get into the zone. These are types of hitters that a really good rise ball will be difficult because we're kind of chasing up to it. It's hard to go to that high pitch, and so they will have some holes in their swing as a result. So with this hitter, we're going to look at the torso metric. So as we just talked about, it's important that the torso remains sort of stacked at this position. So while we will have some forward bend as we're working into a hinge position, what we want to see is that as the hitter gets into heel strike, that they're then changing that forward bend into a side bend. So what we're going to see for this hitter is that the side bend starts before rotation. So we'll see like a big sort of lean back. As we mentioned, you might see like this C position, right, with the back. And so she's already in almost 11 degrees of side bend before any real rotation has started towards the pitcher. So then you can see what that does, the impact that has on the bat path, right? So this is something we might see like her shoulders coming up. There are some things we might see with our eyes on this, but we can see what it does to the posture when we get that early of side bend. And so as we mentioned before, you can kind of imagine just based on this, the bat is blending a little into the background, but if you can watch the path that then takes on the bat, when you know that in softball, one of the main pitches that we're trying to defend is a rise ball or something sort of high in the zone, you can see how this path would make this hitter chase that pitch up, right? So we're coming really up to that pitch. We're having a hard time staying on the top part of it, and it's impacting bat path because of it. So we can see again that we get right, we're going to stop it kind of right as the toe comes down. And as soon as we're working into heel strike, when we should see a little bit of maintaining that posture, right? And then we work into side bend as we go through. There's a lot of side bend happening early, right? So it's not necessarily matching the forward bend or helping her keep that posture. Instead, we're really working up into the zone. And so ultimately, the reason we care about metrics like this is because in hitting, we care what the bat's doing, right? We want to get power off. We want to hit the ball as hard as possible, but we also want to do it as often as possible. So anything with posture that impacts bat path and the way that the bat's coming into the zone is something that we're really going to want to pay attention to, because obviously that's going to make us then have a smaller zone that we can cover, struggle with certain pitches, not be able to get high pitches, swing on pitches, make bad swing decisions, swing early on pitches that we might see then go out of the zone. So again, side bend's good, right? So it's not to say that side bend is bad, but side bend needs to happen at the right time. And so we want to see side bend more as a replacement of forward bend. So for this hitter, we would want to see her in hinge and then just working to maintain that on a stacked position. And we can see how it's almost like a hyperextension or an extension through the back because of how early she's working into side bend.